Shalom. Today we're going to talk about a Hebrew method of biblical interpretation, which is called by Jewish people Pardes. You can see the Hebrew letters for the word Pardes, Pei, Resh, Dalet, Samech, and I have written equivalent English letters beneath that, P-R-D-S. I've inserted some vowels, which tells you how to pronounce the word Pardes. And if you look at it, you can listen carefully. You can hear that it is the same as our English word paradise, and this is in fact where our word paradise comes from in English. In Greek, it's paradisos, and here's a definition. It came into English in the late 12th century, and it's translated as Garden of Eden. In Greek, it means a park or a paradise or the Garden of Eden, and it comes from an Iranian source, meaning enclosure or park, a compound of peri, which means around, and dis, to make or form a wall. The Greek word, originally used for an orchard or a hunting park in Persia, was used in the Septuagint to mean Garden of Eden in the Greek language, where it talks about the Garden of Eden. And it is also referred to in the New Testament in Luke to mean heaven. And here we see a picture of a Persian garden. You can see that it's walled and that there is some hunting. Music is going on there. It's a separated place. The word does appear in the Hebrew Bible. It's Strong's number 6508, and we find it in Nehemiah 2:8. It is translated as forest. In Ecclesiastes 2:5, it's translated as an orchard. And also in Song of Songs, it's translated as an orchard. The idea is that it's a set-apart place of delight, similar to, we might imagine, the Garden of Eden. What does this set-apart garden have to do with rabbinical study and interpretation? The rabbis say that studying Torah is like being in this garden, the set-apart place where we can search after the different fruit, the different flavors and tastes. There is this idea of looking for different scriptures, different pearls of wisdom, and many different flavors within the garden, a place of delight to study Torah. Pardes does appear to be of a foreign origin, but we find within it several Hebrew roots that are relevant. The first of these is parad, which is Strong's 6504, and it means to separate or divide. We can see it in many places, including in Genesis 10, verse 5. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands. This is this division, parad. We can also see it in Genesis 13, verse 9, where Abraham and Lot, the land is too much for them and they decide they need to split up. Is not the whole land before thee, says Abraham, separate thyself, I pray thee, parad. So we see the garden is a separate place. It's a place that's set apart. Also, the next word is parash, the root. And if you listen carefully, you can hear about the Perushim, the Pharisees. This is the name they chose for themselves. They set themselves apart to holiness, to the religion, to keeping the law. The priesthood was corrupt, and they wanted to be set apart from that. We can find the word used in the scripture in Ezekiel 34:12, where it talks about the shepherd seeking out his flock in the day that he is among his sheep that are scattered. The idea of them being scattered is that they're separated out, they're separated apart from the other sheep. We have the root para, which is Strong's 65 09, which is all the roots for fruitfulness, for being fruitful. Again, in the Pardes, in the orchard, we see the fruit. We can look at even Genesis 1:22, where the fish and the birds are created on that day. And God blessed them, saying, Pru urvu, be fruitful and multiply, fill the waters and the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. And finally, one last word is hadas, and you might hear inside that word Hadassah. Hadassah was Esther's Hebrew name, and it means myrtle, like the myrtle tree. So we have the name of one of the trees. It appears in a few of the prophetic passages in Isaiah. Now, the word Pardes is an acronym. An acronym is a word that is made from the first letters of other words. For example, in English, we have NASA. It's NASA. We use it as a word, NASA, but it stands for the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. We have a word, NOAA. It's the Weather Administration. It stands for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So Pardes is also an acronym. The Pei stands for the word Peshat. The R, Resh, the R stands for the Remez. The Daled, the D stands for Drash, and the Samech stands for Sod. So we are going to use some English letters to help you learn those. It's still going to spell Pardes. The P is the plain meaning, and we're going to review all these meanings one by one. The R really is an inference, but we can remember R, reference. D is the devotional meaning of the text, and S is the secret meaning of the text. So let's look at these letters one by one. The word Peshat has a meaning in Hebrew. It means to strip off all the clothes of someone. So it's the very plainest meaning, the simplest meaning of the text. In Daniel 9:2, Daniel is reading in the book of Jeremiah. And when he reads in Jeremiah that the desolations would be finished after 70 years, he doesn't take it to mean anything else. He says, oh, the plain meaning is that in 70 years the desolations will be complete. He realizes he's close to the time, and he falls on his face and begins to pray in accordance with the prophecy, in accordance with the will of Yahweh. It's a literal 70 years. Another example we can take from 2 Timothy 3:15. When Paul's talking to Timothy, he says, you have known the Holy Scriptures. What scriptures is he talking about? The Peshat meaning, the plain meaning, the simplest meaning is the Tanakh. Timothy didn't have any New Testament. So when we talk about the scriptures, even when we're in the Old Testament, we're talking about the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh. Now, we do have to be a little bit careful because we don't want to take this too far away. In Psalm 17:8, it is written, keep me as the apple of the eye, hide me under the shadow of thy wings, and the author is speaking to the Father in heaven. Now, when it talks about the shadow of the wings, we can't be so literal as to think, oh, well, God is a bird. That is an absurd idea. But the plain meaning of the shadow of your wings is we understand not that God is a bird and has wings, but God has a sheltering place in which to keep us. The remez, the inference, the literal meaning for the word remez is wink, like to wink an eye. We only see it one place in Tanakh, and it's usually written in a scribal error where it says rezem. It's in Job 15:12. But it's used consistently as remez in Talmudic literature. And so the wink is, you get it. We're talking about something. You can see what's coming. We don't say what we mean, but the indication is there. In Genesis 3:21, Unto Adam also and to his wife did Yahweh God make coats of skins, and he clothed them. He clothed Adam and Eve. It doesn't say that any animal was slain, but there has to be an animal slain in order to clothe them, in order to make the coat of skin. So the inference is that there was an animal slain. It's not stated explicitly. If we look at Exodus 21:24, an eye for an eye, it's not stated, but we can draw out the conclusion that it would be true for any other body part. We don't have to name every single body part, but also we draw out the idea, it's inferred that the punishment must fit the crime. It's an equal balance. The drash meaning, darash is a word in Hebrew that means to search out, to look for something, and probably you are familiar with the term midrash. And this is what we do when we start digging into the meaning of the text. And this is the meaning that probably applies mostly to our lives. We'll talk about that more in a minute. And here is a midrash in Galatians 4:21, where Paul is talking about a scripture that appears in Genesis 17. He's talking about Hagar and Sarah, and what does this mean to the believer in Yeshua and the believer in the covenants, the believer in Yahweh? How do these two ideas of Sarah and Hagar apply to the believer at the time that Paul is writing, and also as they apply to us? This is a darash. It's his explanation of a scripture in Genesis. The samach, which is a sod, which means secret. It's a Hebrew word. It means secret. And here are some examples of secrets that are written about in these scriptures. In Proverbs 25:2, it is the glory of God to conceal a thing. There are things that the Father has hidden inside of scripture, and we love to dig these things out. This is the sod meaning. In Revelation, probably the most famous secret of all, what does the 666 stand for? And I'm sure you've heard many, many teachings about what those things stand for, but this is a sod. This is a secret meaning, a hidden meaning. In Romans 11:25, Paul writes, "For I would not, brethren, that ye be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part is happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in." There's a mystery. Paul's talking about a mystery. How does that work? And pretty much we are beginning to understand that now in this time. Also in Colossians 1:27, he writes about another mystery in the Gentiles, which is Messiah in you. He tells you what the mystery is. It's Messiah in you, the hope of glory. We love to study out all these secret meanings. People spend a lot of time talking about who is Antichrist and what is a 666. And these, maybe we pursue these things a little too eagerly, because the occurrence of the event will answer all your questions. The most important thing about using these Pardes principles, these rules of interpretation, is that at no level of interpretation may a lower or previous level be ignored or spiritualized in order to make the next level possible. I'm sure you are familiar with the idea that the church has replaced Israel, that God is done with Israel. The church is very happy to accept all the blessings of Israel without completing the commandments that are listed in Tanakh. This idea is called replacement theology. I'm sure you have heard of it. You can do your own research on it. It is not true. So as we look at these four levels, what do they really mean? The plain meaning, the Peshat meaning, talks about our forefathers and what happened in history. The remez, the inference meaning, generally speaks of Messiah. It's some hint towards what happened in Messiah's life or what will happen. The drash, the level that we search out, is a devotional level, and we find personal application in it. And the sod, the secret meaning, is for the future that we will see play out. Whenever there are four of anything, as we're talking about four levels here, it indicates a sense of completeness. And I'm just going to let you look at all these things that there are four of. It's just a wide variety from all over. I have a list that's probably 2 or 3 times as big as this. These are just a few things. And for example, perhaps you have seen a teaching correlating the faces of the creatures of the cherubim that are surrounding the throne of Yahweh with the 4 Gospels. Those things line up very nicely. The 4 cups of wine at the Seder line up with certain scriptures in Exodus. They cover the whole range of meaning within a subject. So, as an exercise, if you like, you may begin to apply these principles when you see these different 4 things. Maybe you can line them up. We're going to take the most popular verse to explain the 4 parts of the Pardes. And we choose this verse, and many teachers use this verse, because very directly we see that it is explained in the Gospels as a remez. The Peshat of Hosea 11:1:1, when Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. We see in Exodus 4:22, and thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, thus saith Yahweh, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. The people were stuck in Egypt. Eventually Pharaoh let them go. When Hosea was talking about this event, he wrote this scripture which is in Hosea 11:1. He's saying Israel is a child of Yahweh, which it says in the Exodus passage. I loved him and I called him out of Egypt. That's the plain meaning of the forefathers, the Peshat meaning. Matthew gives us the inference, the remez, the hint, which is about the life of Messiah. Matthew 2:15. And was there until the death of Herod, where Yeshua was in Egypt, because Joseph had taken him there to save his life, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet. What prophet? The prophet Hosea. And he quotes Hosea, out of Egypt I have called my son. Was Hosea thinking about this? Did Hosea know that Messiah would come and be called out of Egypt? Probably not. Hosea was just writing the plain meaning. But within it, it's a prophecy, it's an inference, and it teaches us about Messiah. In the devotional meaning, we find that we are the ones who have to come out of Egypt, right? That Yahweh has called us out of a life that's in the world. In Ephesians 4:22, that in reference to your former manner of life, you lay aside the old self, which is being corrupted in accordance with the lusts of deceit. You see in 2 Corinthians 6:16, and what agreement hath the temple of God with idols? For ye are the temple of the living God, as God hath said, I will dwell in them and walk in them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Wherefore come out from among them, come out of Egypt. He's calling you out of Egypt, being separate, saith the Lord, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. What is the secret meaning of being called out of Egypt? Here is one reference in Revelation 18:4. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people. It's the same thing that he talked about in Corinthians. We need to come out. Again, in the end times, we will be called out again. And there is another verse in Isaiah 48:20, Go ye forth of Babylon, flee from the Chaldeans, with a voice of singing declare ye, tell this, utter it, even to the end of the earth, say ye, Yahweh hath redeemed his servant Jacob. We need to come out of the world. We see also in Jeremiah, it talks about this. Second Exodus, Jeremiah 51:6. These chapters are end time chapters. Flee out of the midst of Babylon and deliver every man his soul. Be not cut off in her iniquity, for this is the time of Yahweh's vengeance. He will render unto her a recompense. Also in Jeremiah 23:7. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, saith Yahweh, that they shall no more say, Yahweh which liveth, which brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. He's saying we're not talking about this past event, but is coming another event. But Yahweh liveth, which brought up and which led the seed of the house of Israel out of the north country and from all the countries whither I had driven them, and they shall dwell in their own land. There is a partial fulfillment of this happening even from the 1920s and 30s and 40s with the founding of the state, that the people of Judah went back to the land. However, this talks about the house of Israel, and all the countries where the house of Israel is needs to come back to their own land. There is what people call the second Exodus. This is the sod. This is the secret meaning, the end times, the future fulfillment of this verse in Hosea. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. Now I'm going to tell you a secret about the secret. The word in Hebrew for foundation is yesod. Maybe some of you have taken that class called Hayesod, which is the foundations of the faith. When you build a house, you don't just start on the ground and start building up, but you dig a hole and you set the foundation in a hole. And a very tall building will have a very deep foundation. The same thing for trees, right? The roots go down, that's their foundation, and then we see the tree coming up. So there's a thing that's hidden. It's hidden in the ground. It's the foundation. In the new city of Jerusalem, John says, I saw coming down from God out of heaven the new city, the holy city, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. As that city comes down, the first thing we're going to see is the foundation. Everything will be revealed in that day.